Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
Listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
I don't know. I just lost it, you know? I can't believe it. This is not the old Ryan. I just gotta go. I gotta go find myself.
Joe Giammatteo.
You know, after watching this episode of Raw, guys, I had to have my wife dig vomit out of my mouth.
Oh, man. Condolences to staff on that one. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett. We're going to examine WWE history, one episode of Raw at a time. But first, just a quick thank you to all of our listeners for coming back after the holiday break. It was good to take a break, but it's good to be back. So, thank you all for coming along on the ride. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on June 10th, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the Cumberland County Memorial Auditorium in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to Monday Night Raw. Tonight, we're going to have The Undertaker taking on the British Bulldog, but also Jerry the King Lawler has what looks like a very nice velvet painting of the Ultimate Warrior, which he is going to give him later. And when I say velvet painting, it looks like something that might have hung on an old woman's wall next to a painting of a clown. And that is the end of fucking around as we go straight into our first match of the night. Owen Hart, with Jim Cornette, defeats Yokozuna by pinfall in 4 minutes in a King of the Ring qualifier match. We start things off with footage from Owen Hart's King of the Ring victory last year, as well as Owen's acceptance of his Slammy Award. That was nice to see. Real quick, can one of you clarify what they were talking about with Owen accepting on behalf of Shawn Michaels? Was there some kind of shenanigans there that I wasn't aware of?
I don't know.
Yeah, same here. That. Not sure.
Yeah, Vince tried to throw out some kind of, reference to Shawn Michaels during Owen's acceptance of that, and I didn't know what the deal was there. But back in the ring, Owen attacks Yoko before the bell, but they ring it to get caught up and the match gets going. Yoko is up to 666 pounds now, according to Vince.
Mark of the Beast.
Number of the Beast, yep. Owen is selling every ounce of that 666 pounds, though. Every hit that Yoko lays in looks amazing. This includes the moves that Owen tees up for Yoko, the Irish whip reversals being very obvious in this. What's also obvious, if you're paying attention, is that Yoko is sucking wind already and hasn't really done much to get to that point. Although Yoko's overhead slam of Owen looked amazing. That was equal parts Yoko and Owen on that one. There was a nice quick spot where Owen distracts the ref. Well, Cornette hits Yoko with his racket. That's the kind of interference I like to see. Quick to the point and then over with. After a prolonged set of attempts at putting Yoko down, Owen finally hits a nice enziguri. But then, oddly enough, an attempted headbutt makes Yoko happy, which then inspires him to smile widely and yell something before headbutting Owen in response. Got some definite Rikishi vibes there.
Calling upon the power of his cousin there.
Yeah, the old coconut crushers. And here's where things get a little fucky. Owen gets laid out and then set up to receive a banzai drop, but as Yoko climbs the ropes and prepares to launch, Yoko stops, waves his arms frantically, and falls off the ropes, while Owen rolls out of the way. I have no idea what exactly happened here. There was nothing to tell us that it was a slip or trip or something like that. Vince makes mention of maybe Owen grabbing a leg, but Owen was nowhere near. But, regardless, the end result of this is the same. Yoko's on his back. Owen uses rope leverage to get the pin and the 3 count on Yokozuna, advancing to the King of the Ring quarterfinals. This was a great match to watch if you're an Owen Hart fan, as it really highlighted how well he works. But this was a terrible match to watch if you're a fan of healthy eating habits, because Yoko looked blown up from the start. Joe, please, what did you think of our show opener?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty bad match, mostly because of, like you just said, Yoko was blown up. This Yokozuna babyface run has been pretty disappointing because it is something that, you know, would have had potential had he been in better shape. So it's a little disappointing. Owen did all he could here. I mean, he was pretty much working his ass off to try to make this into a legitimate match, but to me, it's just, I don't know, it didn't go well. One thing I want to point out is they had some "We Want Brett" chants. Just a nice reminder of how good that feud was between Owen and Brett, because that was, well over a year at this point.
Yeah.
So that was a nice reminder. I don't know. This match wasn't very good. And based on what we're going to see later, I think Yoko might be taking another break.
Yeah, kind of in agreement. This wasn't that great of a match outside of whatever Owen Hart was able to kind of muster together. And, you know, he did sell for Yoko pretty well throughout most of this match. And anything that looked good was mostly coming from Owen. Yoko had a couple short glimmers of his former self here and there, but for the most part, it was him sucking wind. And I was a little sad to hear the Bret Hart chant, because to me it was like them saying, "We don't want Owen." And it's like, Owen is doing everything he can in the ring right now. Why are you giving him shit? You know, it's not his fault that this is going on here. There were spots in this match where it looked like 2 ring veterans that wrestled many times, but it was all overshadowed by Yoko just being well overweight. And now, I guess, damn to hell, he's at 666 pounds. But the finisher, so, you know, sadly, or maybe he was doing it on purpose, this ending, Joe, you warned us about this before our break, that this was going to be how things end for Yoko before he goes on a bit of a break. He got up there, and Bartlett, you pointed out, what was he doing? He just kind of, did he lose his balance? Is he just too heavy? You know, what was happening there? I don't know. And maybe Yoko was doing that on purpose because he just didn't want to humiliate himself and make it look too good, to make sure everyone in the seats knew that it was just a work. Pretty sad ending to Yoko leaving here for, I'm guessing, for a while. And all around a pretty bad match, really.
Yeah, there's not much more that can be added on here, so we're going to move it along. Last night, at the Rosemont Horizon Arena in Chicago, Illinois, the Ultimate Warrior was there. The Little Warriors were present, and Shawn Michaels was there, and whoa, he grabbed the click cam! Like he likes to do. This is, of course, part of the Attitude Adjustment Tour, and I have to say that I really like that screen graphic that they have of the guy with, like, the electrode helmet on. It's very 90s, and I think that's just the tops. And the opposite of that, the bottom of the fucking barrel, is where Jake the Snake was found, apparently, as we move to footage of Jake from the Action Zone, confessing to doing too much cocaine and pills and vomiting and choking, and his wife being terrified of waking up next to a corpse after
Saturday morning, have your bowl of cereal and put on the Action Zone and listen to a guy talk about choking on his own vomit.
I really tried to think of a good way to fit like an infidelity joke with the Undertaker into that, but I couldn't. Waking up next to a corpse. After quick comment from Jake, we go backstage to where Jim Ross is there and ready to interview Yokozuna after his loss. And there must have been some miscommunications, though, because Yoko doesn't start selling his loss until after he's been on camera for a few seconds. Yoko just doesn't know what happened, as he says that this isn't the old Yoko. And I would have to agree with that, because the old Yoko couldn't speak English. But Yoko thinks he just has to go. He's just gonna go now.
Go find himself.
And that's it. That's all we get out of Yokozuna. I guess he's going for the angsty teenage crowd with that, maybe. I don't know. Jake the Snake is going to join us on commentary in the next segment, but first, I have to ask, Joe, did you have any thoughts on the Attitude Adjustment Tour? This out-of-nowhere sudden emphasis on Jake Roberts' new angle, or Yoko needing to take some time to himself?
Well, I have to say, I agree with you on the Attitude Adjustment Tour. Very Nickelodeon-esque.
Yes.
Really brings back some good memories. That very, very 90s, very nostalgic. Action Zone with Jake is pretty bad. It's another shoot style type interview that we've seen with Diesel and a couple other guys. Not very often. We're not getting this very often in 95, 96. But we've seen this where the WWF tries to cash in on people's addiction problems, and it's never good. So I don't know what they're thinking with this guy who's trying to get clean, and then, hey, how about you go out and talk about choking on your own vomit and doing cocaine? I mean, that's just not a great idea. Yokozuna, I almost wonder if they were going to try to originally say, like, for him to say that, hey, I need to go lose weight. I wonder if they were going to maybe try to go shoot style with him too. And he was like, nah, I'm just going to say I'm going to go find myself.
Yeah, the Action Zone footage with Roberts was, that was something else. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to talk about waking up dead, choking on his own puke next to his wife, but when he said it, I couldn't help but think of that. I think it was called Beyond the Mat documentary.
Oh, yeah.
When they made the comment, we found him behind the dumpster smoking crack.
Yep.
That was immediately what I thought of whenever he started talking about choking on his own puke and dying. The Yoko stuff, I don't have much to add more to what you guys said. He is apparently leaving to go find himself, and I'm guessing that's to try and get somewhere south of the 666-pound range. But I don't know if that's ever going to actually happen. So,
yeah, whenever he said that, I just imagined him maybe looking down at his stomach and pointing to his belly button and saying, if I dig deep enough, I'm sure I can find myself in there somewhere.
What a depressing episode of Raw so far.
Well, at least that little segment was.
Yeah.
Jake Roberts' drug problems and Yokozuna's depression.
Well, it's not going to get any better because now we have our next match. Marc Mero with Sable defeats Skip of the Body Donnas by pinfall in 10 minutes and 28 seconds. By God, in a King of the Ring qualifier match. That's not a good by God, by the way. This starts with Vince announcing Mero and then Sable saying, "Where is she?" out loud when Sable doesn't come out.
Wait, cut his music.
Yeah. Get him out of here.
Well, which is odd in and of itself because, and maybe I'm just misremembering things, but here in this case, Mero comes out first. Shouldn't the valet come out first to introduce the wrestler? Elizabeth would come out first and then turn around and point to the curtains and Randy would come out, right?
I think you're not realizing who the main attraction here was.
You're right. I'm just being a picky dick.
You remember the discussion about the meeting of Vince McMahon saying, that's who we're hiring.
Yeah. Did you see that?
Well, the posing from both of them in the ring was fucking ridiculous. It's like a scene that got cut from Zoolander. They were just turning into each other and posing and making the cat eye Watusi gestures and really, really gross.
Doesn't age well.
No, it doesn't. Things start out lukewarm in the ring, with Skip taking things very seriously, apparently at first, and Mero not. Mero was trying to be the wild man in all ways, with goofy facials and gestures during the corner breaks and rope breaks. The arm drags from Mero on Skip looked decent, but every one of them were really, really telegraphed. It was blatantly clear that an arm drag is what was coming. Mero sticks to his routine, getting in the prerequisite 3 arm drags before sending Skip out of the ring to attempt the predictable wild man suicide dive that's part of Mero's repertoire here, and will be repeated 3 times throughout this fucking match. I don't know if it's just me being a fan of Chris Candido, aka Skip, but in this match it really looked like in a lot of these spots that Skip just really clearly allowing Mero to do these things to him. Like, Skip could hook Mero at any second and take him apart, but just chose not to. Like I said, that might just be rose-colored glasses on my part, but unfortunately, this match kept that same flavor throughout. There were stutter steps, bad timing, just all over the place. The close-up on the wild man's face while Skip had Mero in a bow hold was a mistake. The kind of shit that Mero is doing with his facial expressions, I just have a really hard time taking him seriously in anything. As we break for commercial, I can't believe that this is still going on when we come back. Mero doing the wild man gimmick just continued coming out in moves, the way that he responded and sold. I liked Skip trash-talking some kids, yelling at them after they heckled him. And then I wanted to, try to get a positive in here, and I was able to get it here. The punches from Mero to fuel his rally looked really good. He had some nice rabbit punches and jabs followed up by a Superman punch. And it's easy to see in those 3 or 4 punches why they ended up switching over to his boxer gimmick. He's able to really work that in a, I guess, more genuine way would be the best way to put it. Skip moved himself into position for a splash and then the pin, and thank goodness that match ended right after that, because that was the point where I officially checked out. After the head scissor from the top rope, Mero gets the pin in the 3 count, and I get put out of my misery. Ryan, please, I hated every second of this. What did you think of it?
Skip is this week's jobber. Oh, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Kind of. Kind of.
Yeah, well...
I only didn't make him because this was a King of the Ring qualifier match, so jobbers aren't in King of the Ring qualifier matches, so...
Skip is saved again.
Saved again. Saved by the bell, Skip. But it's coming. It's coming. Don't you worry.
I'm going to get you.
I'm going to get you. But, Bartlett, you mentioned, I really don't get the wild man shit that was going on during the breakups in the corner. It just looks stupid. He needs to give this gimmick up quick because he doesn't get it and neither does the crowd.
That's perfect.
No one really understands what this gimmick's supposed to be, so it needs to end.
Well, who gets it is Ben Stiller. He made a whole movie out of it.
He did. Which was a hilarious movie, so it doesn't make for a good wrestling gimmick, though, sadly. The arm drags, they were okay, but it started to kind of get boring at the beginning where Marc Mero was in control. And then finally Skip took over and things got a lot better, which also helped keep Skip out of the jobber territory because really the only good things that happened in this match were because of him. That suplex that he had looked really crisp. I don't think Marc Mero had a choice to sell for that. It was just a good-looking suplex. And then commentary brings up the Clintons. Did you guys catch the quick, brief talk about the Clinton administration?
I did not.
Yeah.
It was about the Clinton administration apologized because they had the FBI collecting some evidence or surveillance against some high-profile Republicans. So
Vince McMahon?
Not Vince McMahon himself, but Vince felt it necessary to bring that up. But then we come back to Skip putting the bow and arrow in, which, as submission moves go, at least this is a unique one. It's not your typical chokehold or armbar, so I'm going to give Skip credit for the bow and arrow submission here. That changed things up a little bit. Then Mark goes from the top rope for his pinning combination. And, I don't know if he messed it up or Skip, but it looked terrible. I think he was supposed to get a near fall out of it, but it ended up only being a 1 count. Then he goes for a head scissors that got botched. And again, I'm not sure if Skip was the one that fucked it up because he just kind of does a half-assed cartwheel instead of selling it. Vince tries to cover it up, saying that Skip blocked the maneuver. I'm not sure if that's actually what happened there, but it looked kind of shitty. But that was enough. Skip comes back with a couple little moves here, but then Mark finishes off with little flashes of his soon-to-be gimmick, that boxer gimmick. And then Mark kind of nails a Frankensteiner from the top rope. I don't think it was greatly executed, but he gets the win on Skip, and way to go, Sable wins.
We have established that the Wild Man sucks.
Yeah.
I think we would all agree that maybe Marc Mero doesn't suck, but the Wild Man gimmick sucks.
It's very bad, very bad.
And his matches are not very good.
Yes.
So this is the first time that we have seen Skip in a singles match without Sonny, right? Pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
So I went into this match. I have ripped Skip just about every time I've seen him in a match and agree that he is long overdue for Jobber of the Week. But going into this match...
It's coming. I'm going to get you.
I looked at this a different way. I said, you know what? I'm going to see what Skip can do here without all the baggage. And I thought it was great. I thought that the way he worked was great. I didn't necessarily think the match or the moves were great.
Skip did a good job.
Yeah, and if I recall from some of the Conrad podcasts, Chris Candido wasn't real thrilled with doing a goofball fitness instructor gimmick, and he wanted to be like a badass gimmick.
His ECW gimmick, basically. Yeah.
This is kind of a glimpse at that. Unfortunately, it's against the Wild Man, so it just wasn't that exciting. I would love to see this version of Skip go up against a Shawn Michaels or a Bret Hart or a Steve Austin.
Yes.
I think it would have been great.
Someone other than the Wild Man.
Yeah, so I loved how Skip worked in this match. He was telling the crowd to shut up. He wasn't being goofy. He was being just a badass wrestler, and it worked for me. Like I said, it just sucks that it was against Marc Mero because the match wasn't good.
Well, and I think these King of the Ring matches really help out someone like Chris Candido because it forces all of the typical bullshit that could end a match out of it because they will all make it so that you don't advance in the King of the Ring. So you typically end up with clean finishes in King of the Ring matches. So I think that really helped highlighting Chris Candido's skills, but having to go up against the Wild Man, not necessarily this match.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate too, because again, it just shows us what could have been.
Yeah, I love that you made that point because, what I saw in this match was Candido holding back. And if we were to get him in a match with, say, a Shawn Michaels especially, I think him and Shawn Michaels would be an amazing, amazing match.
Do we ever get to see that?
I'm not sure, but I really don't think so.
Because I agree. I think that would be a fun match to watch between those two.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move it along because some fun matches to watch are maybe some of these matches coming up in the King of the Ring quarterfinals. Sable will be accompanying Marc Mero as he battles Owen Hart. Savio Vega will take on Stone Cold Steve Austin. Looking forward to that. But now we're going to take a look at the Sega Saturn Slam of the Week, that being a couple different slams from a match a couple weeks ago, specifically the Caribbean Strap match from Beware of Dog 2. Then we get a commercial of Jerry Lawler getting beat up in heaven, which was pretty decent. And again, this made me think of you, Ryan, talking about, a few weeks ago, where have all our commercials gone?
And then boom, bring them back.
Yep, this was a classic early Raw cartoon, trying to get us hyped for the pay-per-view. But that can't continue because Vince is in the ring to interview the Ultimate Warrior. And here comes the Warrior, and the Warrior is wearing a baseball cap.
There it is.
When has he ever worn a baseball cap to the ring? That's a
Doesn't
rhetorical
he always
question.
wear He always wears it, right?
It's a rhetorical question because the answer is never, ever. Lawler wants to settle differences that haven't really been clarified for anyone outside of that one time Lawler kind of followed the Warrior away from the ring after the Warrior got counted out. And during his little talk here, the King holds up issue number 1 of the Warrior comic book, saying that he's been reading it, which is a lie because Lawler is still sane here. And I want to just, take a brief moment to explain this point. As you all know, listening to our Christmas episode, I was gifted the complete set of the Ultimate Warrior comic books, and over the Christmas weekend, I decided to punish myself by sitting down and reading them in sequence. And let me tell you something, folks. Whenever I say that these comic books are insane, that is not an exaggeration. There is no story to follow whatsoever. It is a complete stream of consciousness word vomit, like some kind of chunk exiting Jake the Snake Roberts' mouth as he's laying in a pile of his own filth next to his wife. It is... maybe the best way to summarize this is that after the first issue, the Ultimate Warrior begins each subsequent issue with a rant under the front cover saying, some critics have told me that this comic book sucks because...
that has to be a good comic.
And then goes off on 7 paragraphs of absolute fucking gibberish explaining why his gibberish makes sense. It is just... a mind fuck. It is a complete mind fuck.
This is some deep stuff.
I want all of that edited out of this episode because, this is the number 1 comic book in the country we're talking about here.
Revolutionized the comic book industry.
So you don't know what you're talking about.
I have read some pretty piss poor comics in my time. But you know what? The one thing that all of those piss poor comics shared is that at even, a very rudimentary level, they all made sense. This makes no sense at all. So the best way I can think of to describe the actual thematic content of this is imagine an Ultimate Warrior promo. We all know how those go. They don't make any sense, and it's, in a tangential way, it kind of circles around what's going on. Like he'll name drop, Hulk Hogan or whoever he's cutting the promo on. But in the end, none of it really makes sense other than he's making like threatening sounds and gestures. Well, this comic book is the exact same way. The word bubbles and the thought balloons and all of the other shit that is in there to kind of try to give you a hint of the story. It's all one big Warrior promo with the exception of he's not cutting a promo on somebody. He's using the promo style to try to explain and educate on destrucity, which... doesn't make sense to begin with, but
no.
So you have to think of it in terms of it's a Warrior promo trying to promote his philosophy, and his promos never made sense, and his philosophy doesn't make sense, and some poor son of a bitch had to try to draw pictures to match it.
The pictures were decent as far as animation goes.
Yeah.
I think it's probably further proof that he doesn't know much about the wrestling business because...
Or the comic business.
Well, what I'm going to say is I'm not a comic book reader, but just common sense tells me that comic books have a good guy and a bad guy, right? And that's wrestling. And it sounds like he couldn't even get that right in his comic book.
Yeah, that's about it. Yep. I'll just cap off my description of these comic books by saying I'm pretty sure. So there's 5 issues. The first 4 are, connected in sequence. And then the 5th is like Christmas art. It's various scenes involving the Warrior doing Christmas poses. And
like our Christmas Instagram posts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The 4th comic, which would be the end of the actual story arc, if you can call it that, was all in black and white. And in this really schizophrenic style. And again, it's hard to understand some of the shit that he says in it, but I'm pretty sure it's all in black and white because he couldn't convince a colorist to do the job. That's what I took away.
The original guy was like, fuck it, I'm done.
Yeah, it kind of sounded like he alienated everyone he worked with.
That pretty much goes along with everything we know about him.
Yeah.
And once again, I think we can all agree that Vince got taken to the cleaners.
the worst job that he has ever gotten taken to, Vince McMahon, was by the Ultimate Warrior. Absolutely fucking hammered him.
Yes. Well, back in the ring, don't forget we're talking about Vince and the Ultimate Warrior and Jerry the King Lawler. Lawler holds up that velvet painting of the Ultimate Warrior as a peace offering. The Warrior does not receive that well and calls the King a con artist. The Warrior clearly states that he is going to kick Lawler's ass, and then Lawler hits the Warrior with the painting after the Warrior turns away. The glass shatters, and this induces a psych-up from the Warrior. Thankfully, we immediately get a replay of the hit from a different angle, which also prevents us from seeing the aftermath of that hit, because whenever we come back from the replay, all we get to see is the Warrior running up the entryway. But let's take a quick break from that insanity to pitch the rematch of Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog at the King of the Ring. And then another replay of the King hitting the Warrior, and then another replay. And finally, we can end this shit and move on. Ryan, you've mentioned this segment in past episodes, this baseball cap thing, so I want to go to you first here. Please tell me your thoughts on just this whole angle so far.
Yeah, I've definitely hinted at this multiple times, and the moment I saw him coming down in the baseball cap, I knew we were finally here. He was going to come down in a padded baseball cap so he wouldn't have to take the full brunt of this vicious painting assault by the King. I don't know. We have never seen him in a ball cap before, but today he's got one on, and it is to extend a terrible feud with the King. I don't care about it, and we're all dumber for have seen it.
Well, I know that, from the stories we've heard about this, that the Warrior was just kind of a dick and
yeah, kinda
didn't want to take that shot to the head. However, I can maybe defend the hat situation. The reason why is because it's a Warrior hat. So Vince is always thinking about merchandise sales and everything like that. But if you're going to do that, keep doing it to try to sell it. Like, don't just do it once because you're going to get hit in the head and you don't want to get hit in the head. It doesn't make any sense
right
for him to do that.
Well, I mean, it'll make perfect sense if we just pretend like it never happened.
Exactly.
That's what we need to do.
This whole segment was, it's a creative idea. I'd like to know if Lawler painted that.
Yeah, I was wondering that myself.
Yeah, because it looked good. I mean, it looked like a real artist painted it.
There was no hat in that painting, just in case anyone was wondering.
So, it was a creative idea to do this, but the Warrior just ruined it. And it was poorly executed and poorly edited because there was very fake sound happening over top of this. Mm-hmm. And Lawler took most of it. He took all those shards of glass in his face.
Yeah.
After he
should
smashed
have had a hat on.
Yeah. And they kept showing the replay, which made it even worse. So yeah, the whole thing is just total shits.
Well, we will thankfully put that segment behind us and go now to our final match of the night. The British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, with Jim Cornette, Owen Hart, and Diana Hart Smith, defeats The Undertaker with Paul Bearer in 13 minutes and 13 seconds via countout. For the record, all kinds of time was spent during long entrances here highlighting the ongoing angle between Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog. But then, in a turn that was somehow not surprising in the least bit, we go to split screen to see Shawn Michaels there, blowing kisses to the Vin Man. And then we ended up spending a lot of time staring at Shawn Michaels. I don't think this was timed all that well, but the payoff here is that Cornette is going to announce he's settled that issue between Clarence Mason and Gorilla Monsoon.
Thank God.
Yeah. When I say that we were staring at Shawn Michaels, I mean that literally, because we leave split screen and go straight to a camera view focused on Shawn Michaels, slowly zooming in on him. He is just sitting there listening to Cornette cut the promo. We never actually see who's talking here. Meanwhile, The Undertaker's entrance has been going on in the background on repeat.
How many times do we hear the gong go off?
Cornette lets us know that the way that they have settled that is that Clarence Mason has dropped whatever charges he had against Gorilla Monsoon in order to allow Jim Cornette to pick the referee for the upcoming title rematch between the Bulldog and the Heartbreak Kid. That's probably going to be bad. I don't know. Maybe it'll be good. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Not holding out much hope, though. But finally, the bell rings and the match can begin, and the Bulldog gets out of the ring and starts walking around. Back in the ring, the Bulldog puts on some fancy feet as he dances around the ring, trying to avoid the relentless juggernaut style that is The Undertaker. It was pretty nice to see that contrast there. After a very impressive display of choking the Bulldog and holding him up in the air, the Bulldog gets down and rolls out for a breather. And then we get some typical things here. You know, the Bulldog trying for power moves, the Undertaker walking the top rope. And, you know, let's not also ignore Diana, though. The camera finds itself looking at Diana frequently.
The flower of the South.
She looked typically confused and unaware of the world around her. Taker sat up out of a nice suplex. I liked that, and I liked Cornette's reaction to it. After a commercial break, we get confirmation that Cornette can indeed select the referee for that championship rematch at the pay-per-view. The Undertaker fighting out of his headlock, or fighting out of that headlock that the Bulldog had on him, was a nice spot. And then we also got a nice camera shot of Diana staring, and the Bulldog holding the Undertaker in a headlock again, but the Taker gets out of that with a great-looking belly-to-back suplex. In another commercial break, we get Jim Ross asking us if we'd like to dial option 6 and spend $1.49 a minute to find out if the controversial Brian Pillman has joined the ranks of the WWF superstars. And I'd be willing to wager that they wouldn't use his name if he didn't. Back in the match, Diana is still staring. After a chokeslam, the Bulldog manages to get to the outside and pulls the Undertaker out with him. There's a nice spot where the Bulldog gets thrown into the ring stairs, and as the Bulldog climbs into the ring, the Undertaker is prevented from doing so by a mysterious set of hands under the ring apron. It's Mankind, and he's here to pound on the Undertaker. This is what gets the count out against the Undertaker. Camp Cornette clears the ring area, and then Mankind proceeds to beat the shit out of the Undertaker, hitting a pile driver on him. That looked great. Bad camera angle, but you can still tell it was worked well. And then the ring floods with officials as we fade to black. Joe, after some of the previous material we watched here tonight, I'm not sure if I'm giving this match a fair shake or not. What did you think of this match and the way that Raw ended tonight?
Yeah, I thought the match was okay. I didn't think it was bad or particularly good, but it was clearly used to just keep stories and feuds going strong here between Mankind and Undertaker, and then kind of making Bulldog still look somewhat strong going into his rematch with Shawn Michaels. So it served its purpose. It wasn't exciting and it wasn't terrible.
One of the main things that I wondered from the beginning was this match, was it to focus on The Undertaker versus Bulldog, or was it to focus on the two separate storylines that Undertaker and Bulldog have? Because both were kind of just set up with, oh, here's some stuff that the Mankind's doing, and then here's the situation between Shawn Michaels and the Bulldog. So you can kind of feel that the actual match itself here was taking a back seat, sadly. And then we go to Shawn Michaels and we waste a lot of time. Like, we talked to Shawn Michaels for a while. Bartlett, you brought up how much we heard the Undertaker's music just repeat about 12 times in the background as Shawn Michaels talks, because that's what this entire beginning was about. And Shawn Michaels didn't really even do a great job acting here. I thought this was one of the worst times I've seen Shawn Michaels, and just kind of the way he set things up and talk about things. So I thought that wasn't that great either. once the things actually started going, this wasn't a bad match. You know, you could tell that these were two veterans that have worked together a few times. Nothing was botched. There was just, I don't know, it was just kind of by the books. You know, it was by the book, and they worked in a very, I guess, just familiar way with each other. Undertaker landed all of his signature stuff. He did a double hand choke that looked pretty impressive. I mean, it looked good to show off his power, and the crowd was certainly eating it up. He also went for his old school walk on the top rope, and Bulldog did a great job of selling that. When the Undertaker landed it, Bulldog slammed back with enough force to flip himself over completely onto his face. And, you know, it all looked really good, I thought, as far as execution. It was just not a super exciting match. Bulldog then went into his standard holds where he just kind of catches his breath for a few minutes. That kind of ended with the typical Bulldog pause power slam that the Undertaker did his crowd-pleasing sit-up for. All in all, it was a very entertaining match. Just, I don't know, there was nothing fantastic about it. It was just a good, solid match. The way it ended with Mankind under the ring, it just helped further this feud with Mankind and The Undertaker, which I thought was a good way to finish out this Raw, especially with the pile driver and then all of the refs flooding in to stop Mankind from applying the mandible claw. A good way to end the Raw and a good way to end this solid match.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think what I keep coming back to with this match is something that Joe said earlier, that it was they used this as a vehicle to tie all of these storylines together and keep them up front and present. And while I don't exactly disagree with a lot of what you said. I kind of feel that maybe this could have been better done in jobber matches. So
yeah.
You know, if we could have had the Bulldog come out and smear Aldo Montoya and then cut a bitchin' promo on Shawn Michaels, I think that would have done a better job than this did. And especially with Undertaker, you know, if we could have maybe had Barry Horowitz get a win over the Undertaker because of the count out with Mankind, you know, keep the finish the same, but just maybe throw Horowitz a victory.
You know, which is why I was saying it's solid. I mean, it wasn't a great match or even really a good match, but what the two guys did in the ring, if I'm in the crowd, I'd be happy. It just, but yeah, this was definitely just, let's focus on these two separate storylines that these two guys are involved in and not really this match at all.
Yeah.
Another thing that kind of sucks is if you're in the crowd, you have no idea about this Jim Cornette lawsuit, special referee stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good point. Also, you know, the video package with Shawn at the beginning, it just kind of set a really awkward tone to things. And the way that video package was produced, I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was done right. It was literally
bad.
Just focused on Shawn the whole time. We got no interchange between cameras. We didn't get to see Vince or Cornette while they were cutting promos on Michaels, and just, I don't know. The whole thing was just a cluster. And the match was solid. Yes, I will agree with that. But what a weird kind of bad way to perpetuate two separate storylines. Well, gentlemen, as I said, that ended our match. So let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Ryan, please, why don't you go first?
Well, you know, my highlight, and it definitely wasn't perfect, as we've just talked about, really, but in a kind of series of poor matches, I'm going to have to go with the Undertaker Bulldog match just because it was the best executed match of the night. I thought the ending with Mankind was solid as well. Nothing to really complain about the way it ended there. So definitely not perfect and not a particular strong episode of Raw, but highlight is going to go to there. Low light, I was contemplating a few different things. I almost went with the Yokozuna Owen Hart match, especially because of the humiliation of Yokozuna and what we're doing with that. But ultimately, I couldn't take myself away from giving it to just the Wild Man gimmick and the Wild Man Marc Mero. Everything about it is failing on every level, and it needs to go. So the Wild Man gimmick is my low light tonight.
This is a famously discussed episode of Raw for bad reasons, and that reason is the Warrior in the hat, and that is my low light. My highlight, I'm going to go with our first glimpse at Skip as just a singles wrestler.
Nice.
Kind of going with that badass wrestler gimmick, just catching a little glimpse of that.
Very nice. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm going with Mero and Skip as my low light, kind of for the opposite reason. To me, this match was just a really shining example of Chris Candido being held back. I don't mean it like that. In terms of storyline, Candido being stuck with this kind of a match, because I feel that we were really able to see, probably because of what you say, Joe, because Skip was able to, turn his back on the Body Donna's gimmick a little bit and be more of the badass that he wanted to be. But instead we get the mild man Marc Mero going over here.
Superfly Jimmy Snuka, or what was the
Superfly Little Richard?
Superfly Little Richard, yeah.
My highlight here, I ended up having to go with Owen Hart versus Yokozuna strictly for Owen Hart. Yeah. I felt that Owen Hart did a really good job of making the best of a bad situation in that match. So that's it. Thank you, gentlemen. Joseph, you wouldn't happen to have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around June 10th, 1996 for us?
Well, I do. We heard earlier that Brian Pillman is with the WWF now. Word on the street is Brian Pillman signed a 3-year contract with the WWF.
Taken to the cleaners.
Yeah, we now know, unfortunately, that he's not going to last for those 3 years, unfortunately, but I am definitely looking forward to seeing Brian Pillman's short run here in the WWF.
Certainly. Yes. Not to mention, we have one of the most famous WWF scenes coming up with him and Stone Cold.
Yeah.
There's another name coming in here into the WWF that we're all familiar with, and that is the man they call Farouk.
Nice.
Ron Simmons will likely debut later this month at TV tapings, so we're going to get some Farouk here pretty soon.
With a bright blue helmet.
Apparently, Davey Boy Smith and Vince McMahon hashed out their problems with the most recent storyline. Smith even threatened by telling Vince that WCW was offering him big money. Vince claims that he had no intentions of embarrassing Smith's family with this storyline.
No. Are you calling my daughter a whore?
Oh, man.
As you guys know, the Body Donnas are looking for a new manager.
Yeah.
Supposedly, this new manager will debut at an NWA indie show on June 14th.
Sounds like a perfect place to debut them.
Oh, boy.
Well, the only thing that Dave Meltzer has heard so far is that it will be a man dressed up as a woman to feud with Sonny.
Yeah.
We heard about Jim Cornette's guest referee, or special referee, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Dave Meltzer is assuming that's either going to be Kurt Hennig or Owen Hart. So we'll see if he's right about either of those.
Not very special.
Yeah.
The stories about Sonny being the most downloaded woman and Warrior having the #1 comic book are both works.
Oh, greatly exaggerated.
I know it's hard to believe, but the most downloaded women are currently the Pam Anderson, Jenny McCarthy types, not Sonny. Even harder to believe is that the Warrior book is not carried by most major comic book stores.
Yeah.
And it's not produced by a major distributor.
Yep.
So
that played into the difficulty of finding it.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to #1 without those two things.
Revolutionized the comic book industry.
And what that tells me is that those entities that you just named have common fucking sense.
Last piece of news here. You guys remember our pal Rad Radford?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Spicoli.
Spicoli was given an unconditional release from the WWF, which basically means unconditional, meaning we don't give a fuck if you go to our competition.
Yeah, right. We don't even care.
Do whatever you want.
Give you a non-compete clause. Go fuck off.
Go work anywhere but here. Goodbye. And that is all.
Thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on June 17th, 1996, with matches featuring Goldust, Aldo Montoya, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.